As I stood outside the glass conference room, seconds away from entering what was supposed to be the biggest moment of my career, Carlos Alvarez, the janitor who always worked the night shift, came running toward me, breathless and trembling. "Jasmine, don't get in that car after the meeting. Don't trust Bradley. He's setting you up." I blinked. "What?" "I overheard everything. He made a deal. If you get in that car, he'll have what he needs to ruin you." My heart dropped into my stomach. I clutched my portfolio like a lifeline, my fingers trembling. My body wanted to collapse, but I couldn't, because seconds later, I walked into that conference room, and Bradley Shore, my boss, the man who had smiled at me for 5 years, turned white as snow when he saw my face. He froze. I smiled. 5 years at BrightPath Analytics had taught me one thing. In corporate America, the quiet ones see everything. I was never meant to be the star. At 44, with salt and pepper streaks in my dark hair and sensible pantsuits that prioritized comfort over fashion, I blended into the background of our San Diego high-rise. That was my superpower. While others clamored for attention in meetings, I stayed focused on the numbers, on the truth that lived between spreadsheet cells. "Jasmine, can you work late again? The Hendricks account needs reconciliation," Bradley would ask, his perfect white smile gleaming under our office's harsh fluorescent lights. And I always said yes. That's who I was. Jasmine Colburn, the reliable one, the foundation others built their careers upon. That particular Tuesday began like any other. I arrived at 7:15 a.m., thermos of black coffee in hand, laptop bag slung over my shoulder. The morning sun glinted off the glass exterior of our building, temporarily blinding me as I swiped my keycard at the entrance. "Morning, Miss Jasmine," said Carlos, mopping the lobby floor. His eyes crinkled at the edges when he smiled, deep lines carved by years of early mornings and late nights. "Beautiful day, no?" "Morning, Carlos." "Yes, it is." Carlos Alvarez was a fixture at BrightPath, as constant as the monthly budget reviews, and as reliable as the quarterly reports I prepared. He hummed while he worked, always the same melody I couldn't quite place. Though his English was limited, his kindness needed no translation. I settled at my desk, away from the window offices where executives like Bradley Shore conducted their important business. I preferred my corner, with its view of other office workers in the building across the street. All of us, tiny cogs and machines we didn't fully understand. The email came at 9:32 a.m. "Jasmine, great news. The board loves your work on the Cortex acquisition. Let's discuss your future at the company. Dinner. Tonight? Bradley." My heartbeat quickened. After years of methodical work, careful analysis, and late nights, recognition was finally coming. I'd spent months untangling the Cortex financials, a mess of creative accounting that had made me uncomfortable from the start. When I'd flagged the irregularities, Bradley had simply nodded and said he'd handle it. I replied with a simple, "Yes, thank you." The morning blurred into afternoon. Colleagues stopped by my desk with knowing smiles. "Heard there might be a promotion in the works," whispered Tara from marketing, her voice tinged with genuine warmth. "It's about time they recognized what you bring to the table." By lunch, the rumors had spread. Our CFO, Martin Winters, was retiring, and my name was circulating as his replacement. It seemed impossible, from background player to C-suite executive. But the numbers had always been my language, the language that BrightPath needed spoken fluently. At 2:15 p.m., Bradley stopped by my desk. 6 feet tall, with carefully styled dark hair and a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He commanded attention without trying. "Jasmine, can we chat privately?" His cologne, something expensive and subtle, filled the space between us as we walked to a small conference room. Inside, he closed the door and sat across from me, his smile wide but his eyes calculating. "You've been with us from the beginning," he said, leaning forward. "You've seen BrightPath grow from nothing to this." He gestured broadly, presumably indicating our entire operation. "Martin's retirement creates an opportunity. The board is considering you for CFO." My breath caught. "I'm honored, Bradley. But," he held up one manicured finger, "there are concerns about your visibility. You're brilliant with numbers, Jasmine, but a C-suite position requires more. Politics, presence. You understand?" I nodded, though something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "I've arranged a special off-site meeting tomorrow morning. The executive team wants to see you in action before making a final decision. I'll pick you up at 8:30. We'll go together." "I can drive myself," I offered. Bradley's smile tightened. No need. I'm heading that way. Besides, we can use the time to prepare. Wear something sharp. First impressions matter. This could be your big break. After he left, I sat, alone in the conference room, a strange unease settling over me. In 5 years, Bradley had never offered me a ride anywhere. That night, I stayed late, reviewing the Cortex acquisition files. Something still bothered me about those numbers. As midnight approached, the office emptied, leaving only the occasional security guard making rounds, and Carlos pushing his cleaning cart down the hallway. "Still working, Miss Jasmine?" he asked, pausing at my door. "Just being thorough," I replied with a tired smile. He hesitated, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Miss Jasmine, I know I shouldn't say this, but be careful, Mr. Shore. He no good." My fingers froze over my keyboard. "What do you mean, Carlos?" He glanced nervously down the hallway. "I hear things. When they think, no one listens." He tapped his ear. "The walls, they speak to me." Before I could press him further, he continued his rounds, the wheels of his cart squeaking against the polished floor. I stared at my screen, the numbers suddenly blurring together. For the first time in 5 years, I wondered if my quiet competence had been mistaken for blindness, if being in the background had hidden the truth, playing out right before my eyes. I packed my laptop and walked to the elevator, Carlos's warning echoing in my mind. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of Bradley's office, lights still on, shadows moving behind frosted glass. Something was very wrong at BrightPath Analytics, and somehow I was at the center of it. I barely slept that night. Carlos's warning played on repeat in my mind, mingling with fragments of conversations and meetings from the past several months. By morning, my apartment felt like a cage, too small to contain my growing suspicion that something wasn't right about Bradley's sudden interest in my career advancement. I arrived at the office unusually early, 6:45 a.m., hoping to find Carlos before his shift ended. The building was nearly empty, the cleaning crew finishing their final tasks before the regular employees arrived. I found him emptying trash bins on the executive floor, his movements methodical and practiced. "Carlos," I called softly, not wanting to startle him. He turned, surprise flickering across his weathered face. "Miss Jasmine, early today. I needed to ask you something." I glanced down the empty hallway. "Last night you said to be careful of Bradley. Why?" Carlos set down his trash bag and looked at me with an intensity I'd never seen before. 3 nights ago, I clean his office. He's on phone, door closed. He think building empty, but I'm there. He tapped his chest. "I hear him talking about you." My pulse quickened. "What did he say?" "He say, Jasmine won't be problem after tomorrow. Say something about papers, too. Sign. Say your reputation finished by Monday." Carlos's eyes conveyed his distress. "I don't understand all words, but I know when someone plans bad things." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I steadied myself against the wall, connecting dots I hadn't seen before. My access to financial systems mysteriously restricted 2 weeks ago. The Cortex acquisition documents that disappeared after I flagged irregularities, Bradley's insistence on driving me to this mysterious, off-site meeting. "Thank you, Carlos," I managed. "I appreciate you telling me this." He nodded solemnly. "My daughter, she works in bank. People like Mr. Shore, they destroy good people for money. Not right." As Carlos continued his rounds, I retreated to my office, mind racing. If Bradley was plotting against me, I needed evidence. I needed to understand why. I opened my personal encrypted backup drive, a habit I'd maintained since my first corporate job, where I'd learned the hard way that documentation was protection. I found my original notes on the Cortex acquisition and began reviewing them with fresh eyes. The discrepancies jumped out immediately. Someone had artificially inflated Cortex's value by nearly $3.2 million, a significant enough amount to question, but small enough to potentially hide in a complex acquisition. My original report had flagged this clearly, but the version now in the company system showed different figures, with my digital signature still attached. My blood ran cold. Someone had altered my report and kept my signature. If those numbers were ever questioned, it would look like I had deliberately misrepresented the financials. I was being set up. The morning progressed in a fog of anxiety and strategic planning. By 8:15, the office was filling with the usual Monday energy. Colleagues chatting about weekend activities, the espresso machine working overtime. At 8:25, my phone buzzed with a text from Bradley. Downstairs in 5, executive meeting room, not off-site. Change of plans. Another piece of the puzzle shifted. Whatever Bradley had planned, it was happening here, today, not at some mysterious off-site location. I printed copies of both the altered report and my original analysis, tucking them into my leather portfolio. I made a quick copy of my evidence to a flash drive, my fingers trembling slightly as I did. Just as I was about to head downstairs, Carlos appeared at my door again, his shift long over, his face pale with urgency. "Miss Jasmine, I hear more." He was breathing heavily, as if he'd been running. "Mr. Shore on phone just now. He say meeting first, then take you in his car. Something about recording, getting you to sign papers." Carlos gripped my arm. "He's not taking you to a meeting. Don't get in that car." The fear in his eyes mirrored my own internal panic. "Carlos, would you do something for me?" I handed him the flash drive. "If anything happens to me today, give this to HR. It's everything, all my work, all my communications." He nodded gravely, pocketing the drive. "I stay nearby, just in case." As I gathered my things, a strange calm settled over me. For 5 years, I'd been the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who never made waves. But numbers don't lie, even when people do. And the numbers told a story that needed to be heard. My phone buzzed again. "We're waiting. Where are you?" "Bradley." I took a deep breath, straightened my blazer, and headed toward the executive conference room. With each step, I felt myself transforming. From the background figure to the center of a storm I hadn't created, but was determined to weather. As I approached the glass-walled conference room, I could see the entire executive team seated around the table. Bradley stood at the head, gesturing animatedly. Through the glass, our eyes met. And that's when Carlos came running toward me, one last warning on his lips. "Jasmine, don't trust Bradley. He's setting you up." I clutched my portfolio tighter, my resolve hardening. As I pushed open the conference room door, Bradley's expression changed from confident charm to barely concealed panic. He froze. I smiled, and I knew in that moment that whatever game he was playing, I had just changed the rules. I stepped into the conference room with deliberate calm, though my heart hammered against my ribs. The executive team, 8 of them, including our CEO Richard Garfield, turned to me with expressions ranging from curiosity to confusion. Bradley remained frozen at the head of the table, his usual confident posture now rigid with tension. "Jasmine, there you are," Richard said, breaking the silence. "Please join us." I took the empty seat directly across from Bradley, placing my portfolio squarely on the polished mahogany table. "Thank you for including me in this meeting," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Bradley seemed to recover, straightening his tie with a practiced motion. As I was explaining to the board, Jasmine has some concerns she'd like to address before her potential promotion. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Bradley said you requested this meeting to discuss serious concerns?" I raised an eyebrow, surprised by the lie, but not showing it. "No, I was told we'd be discussing my promotion. This is the first I'm hearing about me requesting a meeting." Confusion rippled through the room. Richard glanced between Bradley and me, his brow furrowing. "Bradley, you said Jasmine had raised red flags about something urgent." "There must be a misunderstanding," Bradley replied smoothly, though a bead of sweat had formed at his temple. "Perhaps Jasmine wasn't clear when we spoke yesterday." I met his gaze directly. "I was perfectly clear, Bradley. You told me the board wanted to see me in action before finalizing my promotion to CFO. You arranged to drive me to an off-site meeting that apparently changed to this room at the last minute." The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Richard leaned forward, his attention now fully on me. "Jasmine, what's going on?" This was the moment. The precipice between staying silent and speaking truth. I took a deep breath and opened my portfolio. 3 months ago, I discovered intentional irregularities in our Cortex acquisition. My voice grew stronger with each word. The financial statements had been manipulated to overvalue the company by approximately $3.2 million. I slid copies of my original analysis across the table. I documented everything and reported it immediately. My files were subsequently removed from the system. The numbers were altered. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. But I kept a backup. Bradley's face had lost all color. "This is absurd," he sputtered. "Jasmine's making accusations without context." "I have context," I replied, pulling out the altered report with my digital signature still attached. "This version appears in our system now. It shows different figures than my original report, yet still bears my signature." I did not authorize these changes. I placed a sealed envelope on the table. Furthermore, 2 weeks ago, my access to high-level financial reports was quietly removed. And just yesterday, Bradley insisted on driving me to this supposed off-site meeting after telling me to wear something sharp because first impressions matter. Richard's expression had hardened into something I'd never seen before. Bradley! The man could barely stand now. Beads of sweat glistened on his forehead as he glanced repeatedly toward the door, where, to his obvious horror, Carlos stood watching, silently through the glass. She has no proof, Bradley muttered, his voice barely audible. I smiled, feeling a strange power in my calm. Actually, I do, but let's let the internal auditors confirm. Richard turned to our chief legal officer, Elena Martinez. Elena, I want a full investigation starting immediately. Secure all records related to the Cortex acquisition. He turned back to me. Jasmine, I'd like you to work directly with Elena's team. Bradley slammed his hand on the table. This is a witch hunt. Jasmine's just trying to secure her promotion by discrediting me. If that were true, Richard replied coolly, you'd have nothing to worry about from an investigation. As if on cue, Bradley's phone buzzed loudly. He glanced at it, his expression darkening further. I need to step out, he muttered. Actually, Richard said, I think you should stay right here until we get some preliminary answers. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of controlled chaos. IT security was called in to secure all digital records. Elena assembled her team in an adjacent conference room, where I walked them through my findings in detail. Security guards were discreetly positioned near exits. Through the glass walls, I occasionally caught glimpses of Bradley, looking increasingly cornered as he sat alone in the conference room, making frantic phone calls that no one was answering. Around noon, Richard called me back into the main conference room. Bradley sat slumped in his chair, tie loosened, hair disheveled. Our preliminary review confirms your allegations, Richard said, grimly. The Cortex numbers were indeed manipulated, and it appears your original report was altered without authorization. He turned to Bradley. We've also recovered some concerning email exchanges between you and several parties regarding plans to frame Jasmine for financial improprieties. Bradley didn't respond. The fight had left him entirely. Bradley Shore, you are hereby placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation, Richard continued formally. Please surrender your company credentials and devices to security. You will be escorted from the building immediately. As 2 security guards entered, Bradley finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of hatred and defeat. You were supposed to be the quiet one, he spat. The one who never looked too closely. I met his gaze evenly. That was your mistake. The quiet ones see everything. As Bradley was escorted out, Richard turned to me. Jasmine, I owe you an apology. This happened under my watch. You couldn't have known, I replied, suddenly feeling the exhaustion of the morning's events. But I should have, he said firmly. The board will need to address this fully, but I want you to know that your position here is secure. More than secure. He paused. We'll need to discuss the CFO position once the situation is stabilized. As the meeting dispersed, I walked out to find Carlos waiting patiently in the hallway, flash drive still in his pocket. Thank you, I said simply. You risked your job to warn me. He shrugged, a small smile lifting the corners of his mouth. Some things more important than job. Truth. Justice. He gestured toward the conference room. You did right thing. I studied him curiously. Carlos, how did you know what Bradley was planning? He hesitated, then spoke softly. Before coming to America, I was accountant in Venezuela. When I clean, I understand numbers I see. Papers on Mr. Shore's desk. Numbers didn't match. Just like you say. The revelation stunned me. All this time, Carlos had been more than the man who emptied trash bins and mopped floors. He'd been seeing what others missed, just like me. Why didn't you ever say anything about your background? His smile turned sad. When you come to new country at 50 years old, sometimes old life stays behind. New life is different. He shrugged again. Is okay. My daughter studies business. Now. For her, will be different. As I watched him return to his cleaning cart, I felt a shift in my understanding of Brightpath, of corporate America, of the invisible people who keep our worlds turning while we focus on spreadsheets and promotions. The quiet ones see everything, and sometimes they're the ones who save us from disaster. The week following Bradley's removal unfolded like a corporate thriller no one had scripted. Brightpath's legal team worked around the clock, reviewing every transaction Bradley had touched. The damage was extensive, but contained, limited primarily to the Cortex acquisition and several smaller deals where he'd skimmed modest amounts through creative accounting. I spent most days in conference rooms with auditors and lawyers, retracing paper trails and digital breadcrumbs. Each discovery confirmed what I'd suspected. Bradley had been building a case against me for months, carefully constructing a narrative that would frame me for his own financial manipulations. He kept meticulous records of your schedule, Elena told me during one late-night review session. He knew when you accessed certain files, when you stayed late, even which lunch spots you frequented. She shook her head in disgust. It was calculated, Jasmine. Predatory. But why me? I asked. The question that had haunted me since that confrontation in the conference room. Why not just cook the books without trying to frame someone else? Elena leaned back in her chair, fatigue evident in her posture. Based on what we've recovered from his emails, Bradley was under pressure from the board to identify a successor for Martin's CFO position. Your name came up naturally because of your expertise. She tapped a document on the table. But Bradley had been siphoning funds from acquisitions for years. A new CFO with fresh eyes might spot his pattern. He needed someone to take the fall before they dug too deep. And you, with your reputation for thoroughness, became, his target. He planned to discredit you completely, ensure you'd never work in finance again. The revelation settled like lead in my stomach. So my promotion prospect was real, but he twisted it into an opportunity to destroy me. Precisely. Elena's expression softened. For what it's worth, Jasmine, everyone is impressed with how you handled this. Not just your financial acumen, but your composure under pressure. By Friday, Bradley had been formally terminated. The company issued a terse statement about financial irregularities discovered through internal controls, carefully worded to protect shareholder confidence while signaling zero tolerance for misconduct. I found myself in a strange limbo, respected by colleagues who now viewed me as something of a corporate hero, yet unsettled by how close I'd come to professional destruction. The weekend brought little relief. I spent most of it staring at my apartment ceiling, replaying moments from the past 5 years, wondering what signs I'd missed. Monday morning arrived with an unexpected email. Jasmine, please meet me in my office at 9 a.m., Richard Garfield, CEO. As I made my way to the executive floor, employees nodded or smiled in acknowledgement. My invisibility had vanished. I was now someone people noticed. Richard's office was minimalist and impressive, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of San Diego, a single abstract painting providing the only color in an otherwise monochromatic space. Jasmine, thank you for coming, Richard said, rising from behind his desk. Please sit. I took the offered chair, noting the presence of Helena Woods, our head of HR, sitting quietly in the corner. I'll get straight to the point, Richard continued. The board met over the weekend to discuss the CFO position. They've unanimously approved offering you the role. Though I'd suspected this might be coming, hearing it stated so directly still caught me off guard. Thank you. I'm honored by the confidence. Richard smiled, the gesture warming his usually stoic features. It's well-deserved, Jasmine. Your handling of the Cortex situation demonstrated exactly the kind of integrity and competence we need in our leadership team. He slid a folder across the desk. This contains the formal offer, including compensation details. Take some time to review it. I glanced at the numbers. A salary, nearly triple my current one, plus stock options and benefits befitting a C-suite executive. It was life-changing. Before I accept, I said carefully, I'd like to make a request. Richard raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. I'd like Carlos Alvarez to be transferred from the janitorial team to operations support. Helena looked surprised. The janitor? Yes, I said firmly. Carlos is a trained accountant with years of experience in Venezuela. He was the first person to notice something wasn't right with Bradley's documents. He risked his position to warn me. Richard and Helena exchanged glances. Why? Helena asked, her tone genuinely curious rather than challenging. Why is this important to you? I considered my answer carefully. Because he did something no one else in this company had the courage to do. He listened. He cared. He risked everything to do what's right. And I think this company could use more people like that. The silence that followed felt significant, a moment where values were being weighed against practicalities. Finally, Richard nodded. We can create a position in facilities management that better utilizes his skills, perhaps as a liaison between operations and finance for maintenance budgeting. With appropriate compensation adjustment, I added. A small smile played at Richard's lips. Of course. Is there anything else before you accept the offer? I thought about the past week, the revelations, the vindication, the strange new respect in my colleague's eyes. Just one thing. I want a complete restructuring of our internal controls and whistleblower protections. What happened with Bradley shouldn't be possible in a company of our size and reputation. Already in progress, Richard assured me. Elena is heading that initiative. You'll have full authority to implement whatever changes you deem necessary. I extended my hand. Then I accept. Thank you for your confidence. As we shook hands, I felt the weight of the past week begin to lift. Not completely. Trust, once broken, rebuilds slowly, but enough to see the path forward. Later that afternoon, I found Carlos in the break room, rinsing out his thermos before ending his shift. Miss Jasmine. He greeted me with his usual warm smile. Congratulations on new position, everyone talking about it. Thank you, Carlos. And I have news for you too. I explained the new role that had been created for him. His eyes widened, then filled with tears, he quickly blinked away. Why you do this for me? Because we take care of the people who take care of us, I replied simply. And because Bright Path needs more people who see what others miss. He nodded slowly, understanding the deeper meaning in my words. When I start? Next Monday. And Carlos? You might want to bring your calculator. His laugh, the first I'd ever heard from him, echoed through the break room, genuine and uninhibited. It sounded like redemption. My first month as CFO passed in a whirlwind of meetings, strategic planning sessions, and crash courses in executive leadership. Each morning, I still arrived early. Old habits die hard, but now stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor, where my corner office overlooked the San Diego skyline. The transition wasn't seamless. Some senior managers who had been friendly with Bradley regarded me with thinly veiled skepticism. Others seemed to expect me to maintain Bradley's management style, which I quickly made clear wasn't happening. But Bradley always approved marketing overages, complained Dennis from the marketing department during our first budget review. I'm not Bradley, I replied simply, and I need justification for every dollar spent. Establishing my authority required a delicate balance between firmness and collaboration. I studied leadership books during late nights, practiced power poses in my bathroom mirror, and forced myself to speak up in every meeting, even when my instinct was to observe silently. Through it all, an unexpected ally emerged in Elena Martinez, our chief legal officer. Though we'd worked together for years, Bradley's investigation had forged a new bond between us. You know what impresses me most about you? She said during one of our regular coffee meetings. You didn't use this situation to destroy anyone. You could have taken Bradley down much more publicly, made it personal. But you stayed focused on the facts. I considered her observation. Revenge wasn't the point. Protecting the company and my reputation was. Elena smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. That's exactly why Richard and the board were so quick to approve your promotion. They needed someone who could handle a crisis without creating new ones. Meanwhile, Carlos thrived in his new role. His background in accounting, combined with his intimate knowledge of the building's operations, made him uniquely qualified to optimize our facility's budget. Within weeks, he had identified nearly $200,000 in annual savings through smarter vendor contracts and maintenance scheduling. More importantly, he walked taller now, greeted with respect by the same executives who had previously looked through him. I occasionally caught glimpses of him in the break room, helping younger staff with Excel formulas or patiently explaining accounting principles in his accented English. 6 weeks into my new role, I received an unexpected visitor. Maria Alvarez, Carlos's daughter, appeared at my office door one afternoon. Ms. Colburn? I'm Maria Alvarez. Carlos is my father. She was in her late 20s, professionally dressed, with the same warm eyes as Carlos, but a confidence he had only recently begun to reclaim. Please, come in, I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk, and call me Jasmine. Maria sat, her posture perfect, hands folded in her lap. I wanted to thank you personally for what you did for my father. He earned it, I replied honestly. Your father saved me from a terrible situation. I simply helped create an opportunity that matched his abilities. She shook her head slightly. It's more than that. You gave him back his dignity. Her voice wavered slightly. When we came to this country 10 years ago, my father was already 50. His accounting credentials weren't recognized. His English wasn't perfect. Every door closed in his face. I listened as Maria described how Carlos had taken the janitorial position at Brightpath as a temporary measure, one that had stretched into years as rejection after rejection dimmed his hopes of returning to his profession. He cleaned offices at night and drove Uber during the day to pay for my college, she continued. He never complained. But I saw how it wore him down, year after year, being invisible to people, who didn't know he could probably do their jobs better than they could. Her words struck me deeply. How many Carlos Alvarezes existed in our workplaces, their talents and knowledge hidden behind uniforms and language barriers? Your father mentioned you're studying business? I asked. Maria nodded. MBA program at San Diego State, 1 semester left. Have you thought about what's next? I've been interviewing, but... She hesitated. It's competitive. I made a quick decision. Send me your resume. We're expanding the financial analysis team. I can't promise anything, but I'd like our HR department to talk with you. Her eyes widened. I wouldn't want special treatment. It's not special treatment to recognize talent and potential, I assured her. Besides, after what I've been through, I trust your family's ethical compass more than most. After Maria left, I stood by my office window, watching the afternoon sun glint off neighboring buildings. 6 weeks ago, I'd been the invisible one, the reliable background player. Now I had the power to open doors, to see those who might otherwise remain unseen. With power came perspective. Bradley's betrayal had forced me to examine not just the financial systems at Brightpath, but the human systems as well. Who we valued, who we overlooked, and why. The following week, I presented my first major initiative to the board, a comprehensive overhaul of our recruitment and professional development programs, with emphasis on recognizing and nurturing internal talent. Our greatest assets often go underutilized, I explained, standing confidently before the executives who now viewed me as a peer. We hire for specific roles but rarely explore the full capabilities of our people once they're here. I outlined a program that included skill inventories for all employees, mentorship opportunities across departments, and educational support for staff seeking to advance their qualifications. This isn't just about doing the right thing, I concluded. It's about competitive advantage. When Bradley Shore's fraud was discovered, it wasn't sophisticated software that caught it. It was human observation, a janitor who understood accounting, and an accountant who kept asking questions when things didn't add up. The initiative passed unanimously. As spring turned to summer, Brightpath began to transform. The toxic competitiveness that had flourished under Bradley's leadership gave way to collaboration. The financial irregularities were addressed and corrected with full disclosure to relevant authorities. The company took a short-term hit to its stock price, but rebounded stronger as investors recognized the integrity of the new leadership team. And me? I learned to inhabit my power without becoming intoxicated by it. I kept my early morning routine, often arriving to find Carlos already there, now dressed in business casual rather than his maintenance uniform. "Morning, Miss Jasmine," he'd say, the familiar greeting unchanged despite our new circumstances. "Morning, Carlos," I'd reply, feeling a kinship that transcended our different paths. We were both the quiet ones who saw everything, and, now finally, we were being seen in return. One morning in late July, Richard called me into his office for what had become our regular strategy session. "Jasmine, the board wanted me to share something with you," he began, looking unusually pleased. "Our employee engagement scores came back yesterday, highest in company history." I smiled, genuinely happy to hear it. "That's excellent news." "It is, and your department scored highest of all." He leaned back in his chair. "People feel valued, Jasmine. They feel seen." As I walked back to my office, I passed the desk of Nancy, our newest financial analyst, a former reception desk attendant whose mathematics degree had gathered dust while she answered phones for 3 years. Under our new talent identification program, she'd been the first to receive a department transfer and training. "How's the quarterly variance analysis coming?" I asked, pausing at her workspace. Her face lit up. "Just finished the preliminary review. I think I found something interesting in the R&D allocations." "Show me," I said, pulling up a chair beside her. As she walked me through her findings, sharp, insightful observations that would have remained undiscovered under the old system, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with balance sheets or profit margins. This was the real bottom line. Human potential recognized, dignity restored, truth valued above appearance. Bradley had tried to destroy me because he feared what I might see. In the process, he'd accidentally given me the power to change what everyone at Brightpath could. See? Including the worth of the person looking back at them in the mirror each morning. August brought a heat wave that shimmered across San Diego, distorting the skyline visible from my office window. Inside Bright Path's climate-controlled environment, we remained cool and productive, the steady hum of business continuing despite the summer doldrums affecting many of our competitors. I was reviewing the latest projections for the Henderson merger when my assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Ms. Colburn, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." I glanced at my calendar, already packed with meetings. "Who is it?" A pause. "He says his name is Michael Shore, Bradley's brother." My fingers froze over my keyboard. In the month since Bradley's dismissal, I'd heard nothing about him or his family. The company had moved on, healing the wounds his deception had created. "Send him in," I said after a moment's consideration. Michael Shore looked strikingly like his brother, same tall build, same chiseled features, but lacked Bradley's polished veneer. His suit was well made, but slightly rumpled, his tie loosened at the neck. Deep circles shadowed his eyes. "Thank you for seeing me, Ms. Colburn," he said, extending his hand. I shook it briefly, gesturing to the chairs opposite my desk. "What can I do for you, Mr. Shore?" He settled uncomfortably, glancing around the office that might have been his brother's in another timeline. "I wanted to meet you, to understand." Understand what, exactly? How my brother went from rising star to corporate pariah. His directness surprised me. Bradley won't talk about it. He just says he was set up, that politics at Bright Path destroyed him. I considered my response carefully. "Mr. Shore, the evidence against your brother wasn't manufactured. It was meticulous and overwhelming. Multiple independent auditors confirmed the financial irregularities." Michael nodded slowly. "I'm not here to defend him. I'm here because—" He trailed off, seeming to struggle with his next words. "Because my brother tried to destroy someone, and I need to understand why. I need to know if there were signs I missed." The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the confrontation I'd braced for, but something more complex. A brother trying to reconcile the person he thought he knew with the man who had committed fraud and attempted to frame an innocent colleague. "How much do you know about what happened?" I asked. "Just what was in the papers and what little Bradley would say? Financial improprieties? Attempt to shift blame. That's why I came to you." His eyes met mine directly. "You were his target. You would know what led to this." I found myself telling Michael the full story. The Cortex acquisition irregularities, the altered reports, the elaborate scheme to frame me, and Carlos's timely warning. As I spoke, Michael's expression shifted from confusion to horror to a deep, resigned sadness. "The brother I grew up with wouldn't have done this," he said when I finished. Something changed in him over the years. Maybe it was the pressure, the lifestyle he thought he needed to maintain. Maybe it was just greed. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Bradley that I felt a momentary disorientation. "I'm sorry for what he tried to do to you. You're not responsible for your brother's actions," I replied. "No, but I benefited from them." Michael's admission hung in the air between us. "Bradley helped pay for my daughter's medical treatments 3 years ago. Expensive experimental procedures insurance wouldn't cover. I never questioned where the money came from." The revelation added another layer to an already complicated situation. "Is your daughter okay now?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Yes. She's in remission. That's part of why I'm here. To make things right." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and placed it on my desk. "This is a check representing the amount Bradley gave us for Emma's treatments. I've been working extra shifts for months to repay it." I didn't touch the envelope. "Mr. Shore, I'm not the person you should be repaying." "Then who? The company?" "Bradley says he's broke from legal fees." "The company has insurance for situations like this," I explained. "Your brother's actions hurt Bright Path, but not in ways your repayment would address." I pushed the envelope back toward him. "Keep this for Emma's future care." Michael stared at the envelope, conflict evident on his face. "It doesn't feel right to benefit from what he did. The money is already spent. Your daughter is healthy. Adding financial strain to your family won't undo Bradley's actions." I leaned forward slightly. "If you want to make amends, there are better ways. Such as, be the man your brother wasn't. Live with integrity. Teach Emma the value of honesty, even when it's difficult." The words came naturally, reflecting lessons I'd internalized through my own ordeal. "And perhaps consider reaching out to Bradley. Not to excuse what he did, but to understand why he felt desperate enough to commit fraud." Michael was quiet for a long moment. I tried. He won't see me. Won't see anyone from the family. He gathered the envelope, tucking it back into his pocket. He's moved to Arizona. Started over with a different name. The information shouldn't have surprised me, yet it did. In my mind, Bradley remained frozen in that conference room moment, pale-faced and speechless as his scheme collapsed. I hadn't considered his life continuing beyond that point. "I'm sorry your family is going through this," I said sincerely. Michael stood, extending his hand again. "Thank you for seeing me, for telling me the truth." His grip was firm, his eyes clearer than when he'd arrived. "You could have had me thrown out or called security. Most people would have. I'm not most people." "No," he agreed. "You're not. And I think that's what Bradley feared most about you." After Michael left, I sat quietly, processing the unexpected encounter. Bradley Shore had been such a dominant figure in my professional life, first as a respected colleague, then as a devious opponent. Meeting his brother humanized him in ways that were both uncomfortable and necessary. Everyone was someone's brother, someone's son, someone's friend. Even those who hurt us carried complex histories and motivations. Understanding this didn't excuse Bradley's actions, but helped me place them in a broader context of human frailty and poor choices. That evening, I left work earlier than usual. The heat had broken, leaving a perfect San Diego sunset painting the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. Instead of heading straight home, I drove to Sunset Cliffs, parked my car, and walked to the edge of the bluffs. Below, the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly, waves crashing against weathered rock in an eternal rhythm. I thought about Bradley, living under a new name in Arizona, about Michael, working extra shifts to repay money his daughter's health had required, about Carlos, rebuilding his professional identity after years of invisibility, and about myself, no longer the quiet background figure, no longer defined by what others thought I should be. The ocean continued its patient work on the cliffs, each wave removing tiny fragments, reshaping the coastline in imperceptible increments. Time and persistence accomplishing what force alone could not. Some transformations happened in dramatic moments, confrontations, in glass-walled conference rooms, revelations that changed careers in an instant. Others occurred slowly, through daily choices and quiet courage. Both kinds, I realized, had shaped my journey at BrightPath. Both would continue to shape whatever came next. 1 year passed, then another. My role as CFO evolved from crisis management to strategic leadership. BrightPath not only recovered from Bradley's financial manipulations, but flourished under the new transparency measures we'd implemented. Our stock price reached record highs, and industry publications began featuring our governance model as a case study in corporate ethics. On a personal level, I found myself changed in subtle, yet profound ways. The woman who had once blended into the background now commanded attention in boardrooms and industry conferences. I developed a reputation for combining financial acumen with ethical leadership, a rare combination in our sector. The Colburn method, some called it, half-jokingly. I didn't mind. If my experience could help others navigate the complex intersection of finance and integrity. The pain of those difficult months had served a purpose beyond my own career. Advancement. On a crisp October morning, 3 years after Bradley's downfall, I arrived at the office to find an invitation waiting on my desk. The National Business Ethics Forum wanted me to deliver the keynote address at their annual conference in New York. "You should do it," Richard said when I mentioned it during our weekly meeting. "Your story needs to be heard." I hesitated. "It's not just my story. It's Carlos's too. And in some ways, it's even Bradley's." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "Speaking of Carlos, have you seen the latest results from his department?" Carlos had been promoted again, now heading our entire facilities and operations division. Under his leadership, BrightPath had implemented sustainable practices that reduced our environmental footprint while cutting operational costs by nearly 15%. His team, a diverse mix of longtime employees and new talent, consistently ranked highest in employee satisfaction surveys. "He's remarkable," I agreed, "from janitor to division head in 3 years. People bloom when given the right conditions," Richard said. "You taught me that, Jasmine." Later that day, I stopped by Carlos's office, no longer a janitorial closet, but a bright corner space with family photos displayed proudly on his desk. Among them, a recent graduation picture of Maria in cap and gown, now a rising star in our financial analysis department. "Got a minute?" I asked, knocking on his open door. Carlos looked up from his computer, his face breaking into a warm smile. For you, always. Come in. We'd developed a comfortable friendship. Over the years, our shared experience creating a bond that transcended our different backgrounds. He'd gained confidence in his English, while I'd picked up enough Spanish to occasionally surprise him with a phrase or two. I've been invited to speak at the National Business Ethics Forum, I explained, settling into the chair across from him. They want me to talk about what happened with Bradley. Carlos nodded, understanding immediately. You will tell our story? That's why I'm here. I don't want to speak for you. If you'd prefer I leave your role out of it? No, he interrupted firmly. Truth is important. Whole truth. He gestured to his office, to the view of San Diego beyond his window. Look what truth has brought us. Why hide it? His simple wisdom, as always, cut through my overthinking. Would you consider coming with me? Perhaps even sharing your perspective as part of the presentation? Carlos's eyes widened slightly. Me? Speak at conference? Who better? You saw what others missed. You spoke up when it was risky. That's what ethical leadership looks like. He was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. I will think about it. Talk to Maria. She always has good advice. Of course. Just let me know. As I turned to leave, Carlos called after me. Jasmine? Have you heard anything about Bradley? The question caught me off guard. Bradley Shore had become something of a taboo subject at Brightpath, his name rarely mentioned except in cautionary tales about corporate governance. Not recently, I admitted. Last I heard, he was in Arizona. Carlos nodded slowly. I saw him last weekend. Here? In San Diego? At community college. He teaches basic accounting now. Carlos's expression was difficult to read. He didn't see me. I was picking up Maria. She guest lectures sometimes. The image was jarring. Bradley Shore, once on track to become COO or even CEO of a major corporation, now teaching introductory accounting at a community college. Part of me felt a vindictive satisfaction, quickly followed by a more complex emotion I couldn't immediately name. Life has strange circles, Carlos said philosophically. Maybe now he helps others instead of hurting them. I considered this perspective, so typically Carlos in its generosity of spirit. Maybe, I agreed. I hope so. That evening, as I prepared notes for the ethics conference, I found myself reflecting on the long arc that had brought me from near professional destruction to industry recognition. Bradley had intended to ruin me. Instead, his actions had ultimately propelled me forward, forcing me to find courage I hadn't known I possessed. I opened my laptop and began typing, not formal remarks, but a letter. Bradley, you won't remember me kindly, and I understand why. 3 years ago, I exposed your scheme and changed the course of both our lives. I've thought about you often since then, not with anger, but with curiosity. What drives someone of your intelligence and capability to risk everything for money? What makes a person who has achieved so much believe they need more, even at someone else's expense? I'm not writing to lecture or forgive. Those aren't my place. I'm writing because Carlos Alvarez saw you teaching at San Diego Community College, and it made me realize something. We're both still doing what we love. Numbers, analysis, the elegant truth of accounting. You tried to take that from me. You failed, but I never wanted to take it from you. I hope you find fulfillment in teaching. I hope your students learn not just accounting principles from you, but also the lessons about integrity that you learned the hard way. We will likely never speak again, but know that I don't define you by your worst mistake. I hope eventually you won't either. Jasmine Colburn, CFO, Brightpath Analytics. I stared at the words on my screen for a long time before saving the draft. Would I ever send it? I wasn't sure, but writing it had clarified something important. I was ready to tell this story, not as a tale of victimhood or even triumph, but as a complex human narrative about choices and consequences, about seeing and being seen. 2 weeks later, Carlos and I stood together on a stage in New York, facing an audience of hundreds of business leaders. He had agreed to join me, his initial nervousness giving way to quiet determination. 3 years ago, I began. I was the invisible accountant, the reliable one who stayed late, who checked the numbers twice, who never made waves. Carlos was the invisible janitor, the one who emptied trash cans after hours, who knew everyone's names but whose name few bothered to learn. I glanced at Carlos, who nodded encouragingly. This is a story about what happens when the invisible people start seeing clearly. It's about power and ethics, about corruption and courage, But mostly it's about how organizations thrive when they recognize that talent, integrity, and insight can be found at every level, from the C-suite to the cleaning staff. As we shared our intertwined stories, my detailed account of the financial discovery complemented by Carlos's poignant perspective, on overhearing crucial conversations, I watched understanding dawn across the faces in our audience. These were people with power to shape corporate cultures, to determine whose voices would be heard and whose ignored. By the end, the room had fallen into a reverent silence. Then slowly, people began to rise from their seats, applause building to a thunderous standing ovation. Carlos leaned toward me, whispering in a voice thick with emotion, "They see us now, Miss Jasmine. They all see us." I squeezed his hand, throat tight with feeling. "Yes," I managed. "Finally they do." The ethics conference changed things in ways I hadn't anticipated. Our presentation was recorded, then shared widely throughout the business community. Before long, Carlos and I found ourselves reluctant celebrities in corporate governance circles, living examples of how ethical choices, even difficult ones, could lead to positive transformation. BrightPath benefited too. Our recruitment numbers soared as top talent, particularly those with strong ethical frameworks, sought to join a company known for valuing integrity. We expanded operations, opened new offices, and continued refining our transparent approach to business. 5 years to the day after Bradley's scheme collapsed, I sat in my office reviewing quarterly projections when Maria Alvarez knocked on my door. "Got a minute?" she asked, echoing the phrase I often used with her father. "Of course," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from me. Maria had blossomed into a confident professional, rising quickly through our financial analysis department to become a team leader. Sharp, ethical, and personable, she embodied the best qualities of her father while bringing her own modern perspective to challenges. "I've been offered a position," she said without preamble. "CFO at Meridian Health Systems." I blinked, surprised both by the news and her directness. "Maria, that's incredible. Meridian is twice our size." She nodded, a mix of excitement and uncertainty in her expression. "It's an amazing opportunity, but I wanted to talk to you before making my decision. I'm honored, but this seems straightforward. It's a tremendous step forward for your career." "That's just it," Maria replied, leaning forward slightly. "I've learned so much here, not just about finance, but about leadership, about building an ethical culture. Part of me feels disloyal thinking about leaving." I understood her conflict immediately. Loyalty was a core value in the Alvarez family. Carlos had turned down several lucrative offers over the years, choosing to remain at BrightPath where his journey had taken such an unexpected turn. "Maria," I said carefully, "your father didn't stay at BrightPath out of obligation. He stayed because this is where he found meaning in his work. Your path might be different." She nodded slowly. "Dad said you'd say something like that. You've discussed this with him already?" "Last night." A smile touched her lips. "He said, when a door opens, good daughters walk through it. That's why fathers hold doors open in the first place." Typical Carlos. Wisdom delivered with simple eloquence. "He's right," I agreed. "And speaking as your mentor, not just your father's friend, I think you're ready for this challenge." Relief washed across her features. "Thank you, Jasmine. Your support means everything." After Maria left, I found myself reflecting on cycles and circles, on how actions set in motion years ago continued to shape our present. Maria's opportunity represented another ripple effect from that fateful confrontation in the conference room, one that had ultimately created space for new talent to rise and flourish. That evening, I made an impulsive decision to walk through downtown rather than drive directly home. The early evening air carried the first hints of autumn crispness, and the sidewalks bustled with people ending their workday. I passed busy restaurants, crowded fitness studios, and shops preparing to close. And then, through a street-level classroom window, I saw him. Bradley Shore stood before a whiteboard, explaining something to a small group of students, adults of various ages, many taking notes as he spoke. Even from a distance, I could see the animation in his gestures as he illustrated some accounting principle. I paused, hidden by a pillar, watching this man who had once wielded so much power over my career, who had plotted my professional destruction with meticulous care. He looked older, his hair grayer at the temples, his expensive suits replaced by casual business attire. But he also looked engaged, present in a way he rarely had been at BrightPath, where his attention had always seemed split between the conversation at hand and his next strategic move. As I watched, a student raised her hand, asking a question I couldn't hear. Bradley nodded thoughtfully before responding, taking time to ensure his explanation connected. The student smiled, understanding dawning on her face. I remembered the unsent letter still saved in my drafts folder. I hope you find fulfillment in teaching. Perhaps he had. I continued my walk, strangely affected by the brief glimpse into Bradley's new life. There was something fitting about him teaching fundamentals to aspiring accountants, perhaps passing on not just technical knowledge, but, one hoped, the hard-earned wisdom of his mistakes. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find Carlos waiting by the elevator. "Morning, Miss Jasmine," he greeted, the familiar phrase now a comfortable ritual between us. "Morning, Carlos. Everything okay?" He nodded, falling into step beside me. "Maria told me about your conversation. Thank you for encouraging her. She's ready, Carlos. You've raised an extraordinary daughter." Pride shone in his eyes. "She says the same about you, that you showed her what leadership looks like." He chuckled softly. "Sometimes I think she has two parents and two fathers." The comment touched me deeply. I had no children of my own, having prioritized career over family during my 30s and 40s. Maria's success felt partly mine in a way I hadn't expected, but treasured. "There's something else," Carlos continued as we reached my office. "I've been thinking about retiring next year." The news shouldn't have surprised me. Carlos was approaching 70, but somehow it did. He had become such a fixture at Brightpath, his wisdom and steady presence so woven into the company's fabric that imagining the place without him seemed impossible. "The company won't be the same without you," I said honestly. He smiled. "Everything changes, Jasmine. That's how it should be." He gazed out my office window at the San Diego skyline. "I've come full circle, from having nothing to having everything that matters." "And what will you do?" I asked. "Travel? Relax?" Carlos shook his head. "I will teach. Community college needs instructors for business Spanish, for international accounting standards." His eyes twinkled. "Maybe I see Bradley in faculty lounge." The image startled a laugh from me. Now that would be coming full circle. "Life has poetry if we listen." "For it," Carlos replied with a shrug. That afternoon, I finally sent the letter to Bradley, adding a brief postscript. "P.S. Carlos is considering teaching at the community college next year. The universe has a strange sense of humor, doesn't it?" I didn't expect a response, and none came, but the act of sending it felt significant. A closing of one chapter, perhaps the opening of another. 3 months later, Maria Alvarez became the youngest CFO in Meridian Health Systems history. Carlos beamed with pride at her welcome reception, and I felt a similar sense of accomplishment watching her confidently address her new executive team. "I learned from the best," she said, raising her glass in our direction. "From two people who taught me that integrity isn't just a word on a mission statement. It's a daily choice, sometimes a difficult one, but always the right one." As applause filled the room, Carlos leaned toward me. "Look at what we built, Jasmine. Not just careers, something better." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. We had built a legacy, not of buildings or balance sheets or even corporate policies, but of people empowered to do the right thing, to see clearly, to speak truth even when it was risky. 6 years earlier, I had stood outside a glass conference room, trembling as a janitor warned me of betrayal. In that moment of crisis, I couldn't have imagined the journey ahead, the challenges and triumphs, the friendships formed and lessons learned. Bradley Shore had intended to destroy me. Instead, his actions had set in motion a cascade of events that transformed not just my life, but countless others. The quiet accountant found her voice. The invisible janitor reclaimed his professional identity. The company rebuilt itself on stronger ethical foundations. And perhaps most remarkably, even Bradley himself had found a path to redemption through teaching others. As Maria concluded her speech to enthusiastic applause, I thought about power, how it reveals character, how it can corrupt or elevate, how it shifts and transforms over time. Bradley had wielded his power as a weapon. I had discovered mine as a shield, then as a tool for building something better. The true measure of power, I whispered to Carlos as we watched Maria accept congratulations from her new colleagues, isn't what you can take from others. It's what you can help others become. He smiled, wisdom etched in the lines of his face. That, Miss Jasmine, is why you will always be the most powerful person I know. In that moment, surrounded by the tangible results of choices made years before, I felt a profound sense of peace. The path hadn't been easy or straight. There had been betrayal and pain, doubt and fear, but there had also been courage and truth, friendship and growth. Bradley Shore had taught me, unwittingly, the most valuable lesson of my career, that when faced with darkness, we always have a choice. We can surrender to it, fight it with matching darkness, or stand firmly in our own light, letting truth illuminate not just our own path forward, but creating a beacon for others to follow. I had chosen the light, and that had made all the difference.